Hey YouTube, it's Jay, and today we're talking about some more risk management. Today we're going to talk about risks that come from technique, okay? Talking about the things that that you do as part of your game that represent technical risk to the shot. Mainly talking about making the shot. Although these will also affect your leaves, some of these will. So let's jump right in. One of the things that you've heard me say quite often is how it's not important to me how you stand, how you hold the cue, whether your arm is in one place or another. What matters to me is that you're able to consistently deliver the cue straight through the cue ball and hit the point on the cue ball that you intended to hit. When you hit the ball, the cue should go straight through the cue ball, okay? All the way straight through with your follow through and everything continuing in a straight line. So watch the end of the cue here. Watch the shaft. Okay? Do you see how my shaft goes straight through the shot? It goes straight through it. It hits it as close to parallel to the table as possible. So I'm getting all the way down where I'm just off of the rail. I'm not jacked up. I'm not pointing down. I don't have my hands standing way up. I'm down where I'm getting a nice, straight, parallel to the table shot. I'm hitting it. I'm following straight through. I'm not wobbling. And it's working. Now, let's talk about technical flaws, because the technical flaw that I'm getting ready to talk about is having the cue not go straight through. I'm talking about having the tip dip. Okay? I didn't go straight through. I went straight and then lifted to get that dip. Okay? That's one way you can mess that up. The second way, jumping up. Okay? In that case, my tip was level, and when I stood up before the shot happened, and it caused me to miss. Next, steering. Steering is when you pull the cue off to the side. Okay? And it doesn't matter which side, either side. The main thing that's tying all of these together is that the cue is moving off of that nice level straight stroke. Okay, so let's start out with steering, okay? You've probably heard the term backhand English, okay? And what backhand English is thought to mean is that you're moving your backhand during the stroke to get more English, or to put your English on the cue ball. Now there are pros who use backhand English, but it doesn't work like people think it does. Probably the most famous of the backhand English users is Shane, SVB, Shane Bamboni. Shane's way of shooting is to start out, you go this way. I don't care if I make this shot, I'm not going to bother to aim, I'm focused on doing what Shane does with the cue. What he does is he lines up at the very bottom of the cue, pulls back, and delivers. Okay? But if you watch him, he doesn't steer. Okay? What he does is he's using the bottom of the cue ball. He's using the bottom of the cue ball as a reference to find the center of the ball. Okay, so he's looking at that and saying, okay, this is where the ball's touching, that's the center, and he's lined up on it, okay? And I gotta move that just a little so you can actually see me do this. So he's lined up on the center, okay? And in his final stroke, when he pulls back, he drops his arm to get his English while he's back here, and then he delivers straight through. Go watch some video of him. This is the proper way to use backhand English. Now let me tell you something about that. To get that right, and have the right timing, have the consistent stroke and follow through that goes straight through the cue ball without steering, that takes an immense amount of practice. Now Shane, with his work ethic, growing up in a pool hall, you know, his parents owned a pool hall. The amount of practice that he's put in, I would be willing to bet that he has practiced that stroke for more than 50,000 hours over his life. Okay? The honest truth is, most of us will never put that much time into our game. He has practiced it, he has the timing down, he has every piece of that stroke down to perfection. And the people who try to copy him on doing that will never be as perfect at it as he is. Simply because most of us just don't have 50,000 hours or whatever he's put into it. It's a crazy amount of practice doing that stroke every time. Most of us just aren't going to have the time to put in to get that consistent with that stroke. So backhand English is not, I'm going to move my arm at the last second before I hit the ball. I'm not going to start out stroking forward down towards the bottom, then move my arm and finish. I'm just not going to do that. And if you're trying to do that and trying to use backhand English, there are very, very, very few people who reach their potential doing that motion. So I'm going to suggest that if you use backhand English and you're running tables, have at it, keep going, good job. If you're not running tables and you're trying to use backhand English, don't. Get a consistent stroke, okay? So when we're talking about how to get a straight stroke, a straight and level stroke, you know, there are some tricks that people say, you know, stroke through the mouth of a bottle. I don't like that drill personally. I think it's you're always going to be stroking at a downward angle because of the rail. And the bottle is going to be parallel, which means you're going to be stroking down into the bottle. I've never liked that drill. I do like Mike Siegel's, which is use the line in between the wood, you know, like right here between the wood and the cloth, and practice stroking back and forth down that line. It makes it very obvious if you steer. And if you don't, you'll see that you don't. Okay, so if you're going to practice stroking for your side English and for ensuring that you don't have backhand English, I really like using the line between the felt and the wood as your guide. Put the tip right on the middle of it, stroke it, follow through, and see if you're still there. Okay? Now, as far as the dipping the cue and jumping up, so a lot of times this happens, and basically we're talking about body movement in all of these. But when we're talking about the jumping up, if you want to get rid of jumping up or dipping, practice going straight through it and just stay there until everything stops moving. And only move your cue out of the way if the ball's going to hit it. Now, one trick on a draw shot, if you're going to be drawing straight back at the cue, you don't have to whip the cue out of the way. You can simply turn your hand. See? Just turning my hand out of the way. I didn't touch the cue ball. And even if I'm power drawing, I can still do the same thing. It is really easy to simply hit it, follow through, and then just roll your hand over to get the cue out of the way. Now it's a little harder for me because of the problem I have with my hand, but basically, shoot, follow through normally, and then just turn your hand out of the way, okay? You don't have to jump up, you don't have to move the rest of your body, you keep your head down. Something else you can do, and this is how I learned it. So, back in the day, when I was a good player, but not a world beater, I was never a world beater, but before I could compete at the highest levels and have a chance, I used to jump up. I'm a fast shooter. You've seen me. I shoot. It takes me less than 10 seconds a shot, even figuring out what I'm doing. I tend to be fast, and I do tend to lose focus. And occasionally I'll rush a shot. And I usually miss the ones I rush. To get me out of that, CM Lee, the owner of CM's place where I shot, I didn't realize I was doing it until one day he walked over, and while I was shooting, he put his hand an inch above my head, and when I jumped up, I hit his hand, and it was like, what the hell? And he goes, see, you're jumping up. You got to stay down. Okay, so really, that works too. Get a friend, one who's not vindictive. You don't want somebody hitting you on top of the head, but somebody that will just occasionally get behind you and put their hand over your head so you can see if you're jumping up or not. The key to all of this though is just stay down on the shot until everything stops moving. Stop moving, I'm done. Okay, now I can stand up. If you practice and make a committed attempt to stay down and just stay still until the shot finishes, you'll find that your stroke will become more consistent. You won't jump up, you won't drop the tip. And that's all I've really got to say about those two. So what other technical problems cause us to miss shots? We're talking about the risk of missing a shot. Well, so one of the things that can make us miss a shot is applying too much English. Okay, if I put a whole lot of English on this, that ball throws, and if I don't account for the throw, I miss the shot. You don't have to put extreme English on 99% of shots. Okay, so that's probably too big a percentage, but at least 75% of your shots you can shoot with within a tip of the center of the cue ball. Okay, you'll see that most of my shots are about half a tip of English. I'm not putting extreme English on it. I'm using the hit to control it. I mean, that's plenty of English for almost any shot. I hit that a half a tip of left. And it went all the way around the table. Okay, so putting extreme amounts of English. A lot of people that I see shooting, when they put top, it's either no top or as far to the top as they can get. It's no bottom or all the way as low as they can get. No side or as far to the side as they can get. You don't have to do that. One of the other things that will cause you problems is hitting the ball too soft. Okay? Let's say I've got something like this. And you've heard me talk about this before. I did a whole video on it, shooting versus rolling. Okay, so there are two ways to shoot this. I can either, and I move these back up here, but I want to make sure you can see what I'm doing. So I can either hit this really soft with top English and roll forward for the shot, or same shot. My other choice is I can hit this firm and use the tip to control the speed. Okay, so I put just a little tiny bit of top on it, and I can hit it hard, and still roll forward slowly. You see, I didn't roll any faster. I did manufacture a little bit of an angle to make sure I wouldn't scratch, but by controlling where my tip placement is, I can hit that firmly and still leave it. Now this goes into something else too, which is called acceleration and deceleration. All right, talking about acceleration and deceleration, I'm going to show you this on the table. But what I want to do is make sure that I'm not misunderstood on this. Because when I show it to you on the table, it's going to look like I'm advocating hitting everything a million miles an hour. And that's not what I'm talking about. When you shoot, you have to hit with a confident stroke. And when we're talking about acceleration and deceleration, what happens is if you're tentative on your stroke, you're not sure you want to hit it, or you're trying to hold the cue back to not hit it harder than you need to, you will tend to do what's called decelerating on the stroke. And that's a very bad thing. You don't want to do that. So let me show you real quick on the whiteboard how acceleration and deceleration work, and then we'll go look at it on the table. So let's say we have a graph. This is the speed of this is our stroke speed. And this is it could either be time or distance, it doesn't matter. I'm going to use time because it's more consistent. If we were to do the distance that the cue has traveled, then it would be rapidly getting down into faster and faster and faster. So we don't want to do that. Let's just call this time, okay? So let's say that we want to hit a ball at this speed. This is our target speed, okay? And if we hit the ball at that speed, then we're going to have the right shot speed, okay? So this is just the speed we want to hit. And you'll notice I'm not putting numbers over there because we're talking about general concepts. Okay, so here's what happens. You pull the cue back and you pause, which puts you at 0. Okay, that's your pause. You start the cue forward and your speed gets faster and faster and faster. And then you make contact somewhere in there. And when you make contact, then you stop the cue, which basically gives you a drop off like this. Okay? That's probably a little too much drop off. Let's say it gives you a drop off like this, okay? All right, so if you want to hit the ball, what you want to do is you actually want to end up faster than the speed you want to hit. It's only a little bit, tiny bit faster. But what you want to do is still have your stroke, God, that is a crooked line. You want to have your stroke going straight up. And so you want to make contact with the cue ball right here, okay? And there's a little tiny bit of time where the tip is still in contact with the cue ball. It's milliseconds, don't worry about it. Technically, this is how you would hit it. You would start making contact while you're still accelerating through, okay? So this is where you want to hit it. That's called accelerating through the shot. You're in a constant acceleration all the way up until after. You don't peak, you know, this peak right here doesn't happen until after you've hit the cue ball. This is a good stroke, okay? Now, when we talk about deceleration, decelerating through, this is what that same shot looks like if you decelerate through. You basically come up, you just peek over the top, and then you start to decelerate and you hit the ball here. Okay? This causes all kinds of errors. You do not want to do this. Okay? This is called decelerating. Decelerating because you're after your peak and now you're bringing the cue is on its way down, you'll notice that this angle here is much sharper than this angle here. There is more room for error if you make your hit up here, okay? So when we talk about accelerating and decelerating, we don't want to be on the wrong side of that curve. We want to be up on the front half of it, hitting while our cue is still speeding up. Does that make sense to everybody? That's called accelerating through the stroke. Now, when I show you this, if I show it to you and you're not looking for this, what you're going to think is that I'm telling you to hit everything 1,000,000 miles an hour into the pockets, and that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, regardless of what speed you're trying to get, and I'm going to throw some numbers on here just for demonstration purposes. Let's say you want the cue ball to travel at 7 miles per hour, right? That's the speed you want. Now, we're never going to think about it in terms like that. This is just for demonstration. But let's say you wanted to hit it at 7 miles an hour, right? What you would do is you would begin your stroke at 0, and you would peak at 7.2 miles per hour would be your actual stroke peak speed, but you make the contact just before it hits 7, and the cue ball leaves the tip just after 7, maybe 7.05 or something like that. So when we talk about acceleration, this is what we're talking about. And this acceleration, despite my horrible lines, this acceleration to the speed, you want to be really smooth, okay? You want it to be a nice, smooth curve. Maybe we want to hit it right here. We want it to be a nice, smooth curve because on the other side, we're just going to drop off, okay? And we don't want to hit it here. If we hit it there, you can mess up the speed. You're going to see that when I hit with a decelerated stroke that I double hit the object ball. You can miscue very easily decelerating. There's just so much that can go wrong there. So what you want to do is accelerate through the hit, okay? You actually want to move the cue a little bit faster than what you're doing. And then if we tie that in with the idea of stunning the cue ball, we can actually accelerate way past. We can say, hey, we want the object ball to move this fast, or the cue ball to move this fast, and if we have a stun angle, we can go way up here. And as long as we're still in the accelerating portion of the stroke, the difference in how the cue ball moves between these two on a stun shot is very, very little. It might be hitting it here instead of here, might be a ½ inch difference, okay? Just because of the angle that we have. So that's why I say we like to stun the cue ball, okay? We like to shoot the cue ball, not roll the cue ball, okay? When you roll the cue ball, the difference between these two is immense. It could be 8 inches, 12 inches difference. If you're stunning or shooting the cue ball, then you have much more control and you have a greater variance or greater room for error. All right, so let's take this to the table and I'll show you what I'm talking about. When you shoot the ball, when you're hitting the cue ball, the way that it looks is you've got your warm-up, you start slow and speed up as you go through. Now, I overly exaggerated that, okay? If you start out fast and you slow down, you can see I just double hit that. If you start out fast and then slow down, you have a much greater chance of doing something wonky with your stroke like I did on the first one there and not making a clean contact with the cue ball. So both the idea of taking speed out of it by using tip placement and the idea of not decelerating, you can fix both of those issues by shooting the ball and using your tip placement to control your speed, okay? And in most cases, what we want to do is we want to have some kind of slight angle on the shot, okay? And we're going to talk about this in the leave risk part, and when we talk about the leaves a little bit more. But to have a slight angle so that you can hit it firmly, you saw how fast the ball went, but the cue ball just rolls into position. And you saw how slow the cue moved there. Let me do that again now that I've told you what you're looking at, so you can see it. I'm going to hit this with a positive, firm stroke, and I'm going to let, and the object ball, and this is true even if there's an angle, okay? So even if there's a little bit more angle than that, I can hit this firmly into the center of the pocket and have the cue ball drift into position. You see that? That object ball went much faster than that cue ball. And so taking advantage of that means that when we shoot, if we do a positive accelerating cue, we can shoot hard into the corner and still have a slow roll of the cue ball. And that's really what you want. You want to be able to hit a shot that is, you want to be authoritative. And I'm not telling you to slam the ball in the pocket. What I'm saying is you want to hit it firm and solid and smooth, and the best way to do that is to hit it at a naturally faster pace. So for both smoothing out flaws in your stroke, like if you have a wiggle in your stroke, if you hit harder, your arm has less chance of wiggling. You want it to be mass muscle movement, not fine motor control, okay? We don't want to have to train fine motor control. We want to train mass movement. And so the way to do that is rather than trying to get that just right to fall in the pocket, we would much rather hit it with a firm stroke and use our tip placement to determine how far the cue ball is going to roll. And ideally we would come off the rail and down the leave zone. I was on the wrong side to do that. Anyhow, so those are the things for today. If you have questions, please put them down in the comments. I hope you have a great day, and we'll catch you next time.